What's up, YouTube? Today we visit a website titled AlphaGamePlan.com. We have an article titled Don't Be Evil, a case for enlightened self-interest. And it was written by Susan Walsh. Or we don't have a date, we have a time, 1:54 p.m. So the article was going over a response to a letter that was published by Robinson at another website. And the debate was focused on what are the ethical considerations a man should observe when seducing women. And Susan says that she's written plenty in the past about players, jerks, and douchebags, and the practitioners of what some call dark game. But mainly, she says that her role was into warning women about such tactics that men use. And she was giving advice to women saying there's no such thing as don't ask, don't tell in relationships. If you don't ask and he doesn't lie, it's on you. Right? So she's basically saying you got to talk to him, find out, and ask these questions. Because if you never asked, and it comes across later in the relationship where you're like, holy crap, why didn't you say anything? Well, you never asked, right? So it'll be on you. And then she goes over stating that from time to time, she's picked up on behavior that she's found exploitative and repellent. And she finds that one participates in this behavior and allows themselves to be treated poorly. And some examples of that poor behavior are physical violence, lying, cheating, using demeaning terms towards a woman's appearance, and it's under the guise of just being playful tease, as well as doing like a push-pull, right, inconsistent signals, and it's to manipulate you or make you feel anxious or uncertain. And she says that because she had brought this to light, men, on the other hand, have said that, well, women do certain things too, right? Women can do a lot of bad things to men, and that men suffer too, right? Some things that women do that are terrible to men is also lying and cheating. But then we also have nuclear rejections, where a woman would just blow you out in public and be cruel to you, taking advantage of men by getting them to spend money. Then we have something called using a man for certain things, right? So you milk the friendship for attention or affirmation because you know you won't be in a sexual relationship with him, but he's a male and you enjoy the attention. And then saying, for example, a man would be a good guy, right? Treat you well, but you don't reward that type of behavior. And instead you reward the guys who have bad characteristic traits, like being an asshole, while rejecting the guys for being too nice. And so she's saying that, you know, on both sides of the coin, men are treating women poorly and women are treating men poorly. And she states that she's able to figure out her personal boundary, but it's really up to the individual man and woman to dictate and to enforce where you draw the line, right? Everyone is going to be different, and there are certain things that you're going to put up with and there's certain things that you're not going to put up with. So as long as you have communication in that relationship, then moving forward, you should be okay. As well, she states, each of us must decide with total commitment how we will interact with and respond to others. And while we will be imperfect, we should consider a philosophy about this. Basically, she's saying men should get together and teach their sons, teach their brothers, teach the uncles, the fathers, the grandfathers, and come up with a system of how you treat the opposite sex. And the same thing should happen on the women's side. Women will take their daughters, their sisters, aunts, grandmothers, and figure out a way and how to treat men. She brings up another blog writer called Diamond and states that Diamond's approach is the first innovation and negotiation strategy since Win-Win in the 90s. He believes that the approach leaves too much on the table and would rather focus on making an emotional connection between the two parties so that both parties get more of what they want. And while self-interest is not objectionable because it's quite natural, the key is to finding a balance between two parties, right? It's kind of like a negotiation between men and women. I'm going to get what I want and you're going to get what you want to a certain extent. Then she goes on to Diamond's thoughts and opinions on what negotiation is. And according to Diamond, done right, there is no difference between negotiation, persuasion, communication, or selling. They should all have the same process. That is, they should start with goals, focus on people, and be situational. And he describes this process in order of preference. And in terms of negotiation, a terrible negotiation would be forcing people to do what you will them to do. And somewhere in the middle is getting people to think or perceive what you want them to think or perceive. And the best and self-enforcing type of negotiation is getting people to feel what you want them to feel. And I just want to quickly point out that just because in the definition it's saying getting people, for example, getting people to perceive what you want them to perceive, this is going both ways for both parties. It's not a one-way street. All right. And this goes for each order of preference. Susan also goes on Diamond's opinions on goals. And he states the whole reason why you're negotiating is to meet your goals. Everything else is subservient to that. The goals are what you're trying to accomplish. So don't try to establish a relationship unless it brings you closer to your goals. So I'll give you a brief example. You have a man and a woman. Let's say a woman wants to have a family and a man wants to have a family. Well, it'll make sense that they get together and they establish a relationship, because getting into a relationship with a man and a woman will bring both of them closer to their goal, which is to start a family, right? And he continues, the point of negotiation is to get what you want. So why would you negotiate to create a relationship if it won't help you meet your goals? Why should you try for a win-win if others try to hurt you? So going back to the example, you want to start a family. Let's say a man and a woman meet each other and the man wants to start a family, but the woman doesn't. It wouldn't make sense for that man and that woman to get into a relationship together because one of them does not want to start a family. And he says, so don't get distracted and clouded with other stuff, right? Being nice or being tough or being emotional. Just make sure you never take your eyes off your goal, because it's what you have at the end of the process that you don't have now, right? That's the whole point, getting what you don't have at the end. And he continues on his opinions on power. He says, getting more is not a manifesto to gain power over people in order to force your will on them. First, the minute you use more power over someone, the relationship is usually over. People don't want relationships with those who try to force them to do things against their will. Second, it sends the wrong message, one of tension, struggle, and conflict, and that this is less profitable because people use their energy to defend themselves instead of building something. And lastly, the raw use of power prompts retribution, whether now or later. So in simpler terms, what Diamond is stating is, do not try to get one over on somebody with the sole intention of being able to force them to do what you want. Kind of like blackmail, right? If you blackmail somebody, or let's say you use raw power, right? You physically make someone do something, it's not going to end well for that relationship. And most of the time, all negotiations will be off. Both parties will remove themselves from the situation, and it's done. This is not the way to negotiate, and it's not going to work out for you. And as he stated, most people don't want relationships with those who try to force them to do things against their will, right? It's not a good idea. He says, and he continues stating, the use of power in negotiation is a big risk, right? If you see negotiation in terms of gaining or grabbing power over the other side, is going to set up a conflict. And this conflict is normally going to make things very, very bad. It will create an emotional response. And if the other person who is being forced by, let's say, someone using blackmail, if they can't somehow get back at you, or if they feel like they're trapped and they can't do nothing about it, they're going to find a way to get even, whether it's good or bad. So it's just not a good idea. And in some cases, depending on how much power they have, they can physically harm you, maybe even mentally harm you or financially harm you. It's kind of, and he gives a great example. Let's say you have your own company and you have employees, and every day they do, it's a manual labor job. If you decide one day to beat up your employees because they're not working fast enough, are they going to work faster? No, it just doesn't work like that. Then Diamond continues on his opinion on framing. He says, framing will often change the balance of power in a negotiation, no matter how big or powerful the other party. It should be used carefully and in a positive way. You don't have to accept the other person's standards in framing. A big part of framing is reframing. You start with how they phrase something, and then you find a different way to interpret it so that they get insight and hopefully will meet your goals. And I think this is a very important tactic in negotiation as well as in relationships. I think most of the time when you're getting into a relationship, whether it's clear or not clear, there's always a quote unquote power imbalance or some type of imbalance. And what Diamond is getting at here is that through framing and reframing, you'll be able to leverage the difference. For an example that he gives, so when they phrase something, the idea for you is to interpret it in a way that moves you more towards your goal. So let me see if I can think of an example. You're moving, right? You got a truck outside your house and you're moving things and you're putting them in the truck. And you finally got to the point where you no longer can use your hands anymore. You need some type of, maybe, let's say a dolly, right? You need a dolly, and you notice your neighbor has one. So you go to your neighbor and say, hey, how you doing? I've been moving my things out. I'm putting them on the truck, and I have this really big stove, and I need to move the stove. May I use your dolly? And now on your neighbor's side, he's saying, my son was supposed to come, and he's saying this in his head because this is his situation. My son was supposed to come 5 minutes ago, and he should be here any minute now. and he was going to take the dolly. Okay, so I can't let them have it because my son needs it, right? So you tell them, look, I understand you need the dolly, but right now my son is coming to pick it up because he has something very, very urgent. I'm sorry I can't help you, but I wish you all the luck. And then the guy who needs the dolly states, okay, I understand that. Well, how about we do this? I understand that you need the dolly and that your son's going to pick it up right now. How about I use the dolly and I take this equipment down and then I go help you, right? This is an example. And so he says, when it comes to framing, it's much more powerful to let others make the decision instead of telling them what the decision should be. It's more about leading them to where you want them to go. And you do that through framing and being incremental, taking it one step at a time. And then it ends with Diamond's opinion on trust. And Diamond states, trust is a major people issue. The benefits of trust are huge. Faster deals, more deals, and bigger results, as well as not having it be costly. Trust is that feeling of security that the other person will protect you. And with some trust, another person will help you until it's too risky for them or a better opportunity comes along. And with a lot of trust, the other party will help you even if it harms them. It is very important to understand the trust dynamic. The major component of trust is honesty, being straight with people. Trust does not mean that both sides agree with each other or are always pleasant to each other. It does mean, however, that the parties believe each other. It is very important. There's no way trust can occur between two parties if they are not being honest and forthcoming. For example, let's say in many relationships, the first process is to build that trust. And you can do that, by doing certain things, perhaps over time. But let's say you're in a relationship and then something happens that doesn't make sense. However, because you trust them, you kind of ignore it or brush it off. Maybe you don't question it. But then something keeps happening. And so now you're wondering, well, what's going on? And then you ask them about it. And they say, oh, there's nothing, da 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 da. Oh, don't you trust me? Stuff like that. But at that point, certain things can be fixed and certain things cannot be. But if there's ever a moment between those two parties where the trust is broken, it's very hard to replace and it's very hard to fix. Once the trust is gone, in a sense, that relationship is no longer, connected, you can say, like that it's severed. There's no trust there, so you can't fully engage with that person because you don't know if they'll harm you or vice versa. And he continues saying the opposite of being honest is being dishonest or lying. And that includes telling the truth in such a way that you omit facts and creates a false impression. It can be clever manipulation of emotions. It can be the distorting of information or bluffing. It's anything that doesn't pass the smell test. And he brought up a very good point. Just because you are bringing up, quote unquote, the truth, if you are omitting things or painting a certain picture with the words you use, all you're really doing is just being manipulative. And being manipulative has the ability to affect trust. And while maybe in the short term, you were able to get someone to overcommit and trust you on a certain position, but if the truth comes out, it's always going to hurt you. Anything that is not the truth has the potential to make them trust more, as well as has the potential to make them trust less. But if you don't tell the truth and they find out you didn't, then there's 100% guarantee that the trust will be broken, will be gone. It will be a waste of a time after that. And Susan says, there's nothing wrong with self-interest or putting your needs first, but it's more important about being a very strong, argumentative for your self-interest with the emotional intelligence in the relationship of the other person, right? It's always better to be a win-win. And if you can get more, help them get more. So all in all, when it comes to a relationship between a man and a woman, it's very important to negotiate the wants and needs of yourself and how you can help achieve that for the other person. There's nothing wrong with being interested in yourself and putting yourself first. In fact, it can be almost expected to put your needs first. Just make sure you do it in a way where you bring up what's important to you and what you need, while also getting it accomplished with not damaging the emotional intelligence of the other person and without getting a power move involved. Do it with trust, do it with honesty, do it in such a way that you framed it respectfully and you don't use or abuse the power you may have over them. And most importantly, make sure you get the goal that you wanted to get. At the end of the day, if you in negotiations and you discuss everything you want, but what you guys to agree to doesn't have what you wanted, then it's not really a win-win and it's not good for you. So don't accept something like that. So all in all, if you feel like you've learned something from this video, please leave a comment down below. I'm always happy to talk to you. I encourage you to add something to this conversation and let me know what you think. So I'll see you next time.